Welcome to December, welcome to Advent, which is the beginning of the church year. And welcome to the December Hymn of the Month. And our Advent Hymn of the Month too, I guess, because Advent this year runs all the way from the 1st to the 4th Sundays in December. That means there's only one Sunday in December that isn't an Advent Sunday, and that's going to be the 31st. That will be the first Sunday of Christmas. But because we spend so much time in Advent this year in December, we decided to make our Hymn of the Month, O Come, Emmanuel. I'm going to give you a history lesson in a little bit, but I brought a couple hymnals. This is my oldest Lutheran hymnal. It's not the oldest Lutheran hymnal, obviously, but it's my oldest Lutheran hymnal. It's from 1917. And in it, the very first song, we see Veni, Veni, Emmanuel. Hold that up here so you can kind of take a look at it. Note that it only has 4 verses, and also note that it is written in what we call metered music. That is to say, there's a big long line that kind of breaks up little counts of the notes. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. That'll be interesting a little later on. Hold that thought. My next eldest hymnal is the Concordia hymnal, the old black book, and it looks rough because it's been used a lot. It was a hymnal out of college before it received a second life with me. So 1932. And we do see O Come, Emmanuel here, but it's not the tune that we think of. Normally we think of the tune Veni, Emmanuel. Da, 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 da. This one is not. This is the tune St. Petersburg. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. It's translated by John Mason Neale. He basically set us up for the most popular English translation ever. Almost all of our English translations are based off of his. Note that there's 5 verses now. Interesting, hold that thought. My next eldest Lutheran hymnal is a Danish hymnal for church and home. This one was from my spouse's grandparents. I just think that's kind of cool. This one's from 1938, so we're still in the 30s, and we're still using St. Petersburg. It even has, I think, I haven't checked them, but I think the same harmonizations, which is where, soprano, alto, tenor, bass are all the same as each other. So we still have St. Petersburg, still have 5 verses, still in the 30s. Hymn trends are strange, but it's interesting, worth noting. The SBH, the Old Red Hymnal. Here, we're back to Veni, Emmanuel. We're in 1958 for this one, so 20 years after the Danish hymnal, or about, let's call it 26 after the Concordia hymnal. So we see we're back to Veni, Emmanuel and Veni, Veni, Emmanuel.
The first thing that I notice is that this is not metered. There aren't any specific lines outlining specific counts. I also note that on the left-hand side, we've got these note heads that have little flags coming off of them, and they're plain stems on the right-hand side. The alto and bass and tenor parts are all a little bit different as well, but they have the same number of verses and syllables.
We still just say that it's a medieval antiphon Latin hymn. Now we have a time for it, though. We say 1710, but we don't give an actual source. So we know an exact date, but not an exact book. The way we cite our sources has changed a little bit. The LBW, the elbow, what a classic. A lot of us have sung out of the Green Book. When I take a look at this, I still have 5 verses, but now I have a source. The Psalteriolum Cantionum Catholicarum from 1710. I'm finally citing my source here, and still that translation by John Mason Neale. Now we're calling it a French processional from the 15th century. So nothing more specific than that, but by this point we've located it in the National Library of France. I think it was France. And so we know that that's where that tune is from. Still only 5 verses. Hold that thought. We're going to take a brief detour out of Lutheranism into Episcopalianism and the hymnal 1982. The LBW was published in 1978. Hymnal 1982 was published in 1982. So when we look in here, that looks like plain song. You'll notice there's no meters. There's none of those long lines in between things. The LBW did that as well. But the LBW wrote everything with stems, all those notes that have those little, up and down lines attached to the note heads. This doesn't. This is much more accurate to the way this would have shown up in its original form, in its original songbook. This looks like chant. The other thing that's interesting here is that we've got 8 verses, or 7 verses with one of them repeated. And if I get real close, I can see there are dates listed alongside each of those verses. I think it's time for our history lesson.
The O antiphons is another name for O come, Emmanuel. O because each verse starts with O come, O wisdom from on high, O come, great Lord of might, whatever the translation happens to be. An antiphon is a short verse, musical verse, that is sung or chanted in response to a psalm or a canticle. Antiphonal singing is something a little different. That's like a back and forth 2 groups or a leader and a group sort of singing. This isn't that. We're talking about that verse in response. Even though we only see that 1710 version of the Latin hymn, O come, Emmanuel, at that point, there is evidence that something like it existed as early as the 8th or 9th centuries. And in fact, we'll see, like in the hymnal 1982, it is referenced as being that old. So maybe 8th, 9th, 12th century, as opposed to being from 1710. The tradition is that there were a total of 7 verses that would be sung by monastics, by monks and nuns, in the 7 evening services leading up to Christmas Eve, where the last one would be sung in correspondence with the Magnificat, Mary's song, which is traditionally sung as part of Vespers, or the evening prayer service. Those 7 sentences, those 7 antiphons, included O sapientia, which is wisdom, O Adonai, which is a Hebrew word for Lord, O radix Jesse, the root or rod of Jesse, who is the father of King David, and you'll remember that both Mary and Joseph, Jesus' parents, were from the line of David. Then we have O clavis David, O key of David, O oriens, orient, east, day star, day spring, the idea of dawn, O rex, king, and O Emmanuel, God with us. Right, so those 7 verses kind of leading up each day to Christmas. That means that we have the opportunity to not only sing this together in our worship services collectively, collaboratively, congregationally, we could potentially take this as a devotional track for ourselves this December, singing 1 verse per day leading up to Christmas Eve.
And so finally here in the ELCA, we come to Evangelical Lutheran Worship, the cranberry-colored hymnal that we're all very familiar with. It's in the pews at Our Savior's. And number 257 here, we'll see it's written like chant. It's got 7 verses rather than 5. And down here, it gives us a symbol of which day to sing which antiphon, or which day to sing each stanza of the hymn. So here, even though we started back in 1917, only in 2006 do we find ourselves finally back in alignment with that sort of ancient practice of singing these in the week before Christmas and of enjoying them as a way to prepare our hearts for the arrival of Christ, which is really what Advent is all about. We will be hearing our hymn of the month in a variety of ways. Our wonderful organist Kim is going to be introducing it to us this upcoming Sunday. As I'm recording this, that'll be the 3rd. of December, the first Sunday of Advent. So Kim will be introducing it to us as an organ piece. On the 10th, we're going to hear it from Kids Music and Arts and a few other members of the church as we use it to help mark different places within the all-church Advent program. And then we'll find other ways with other groups to sort of keep it in the mix later on in the month. And I hope that you'll enjoy those and listen to them and kind of hold on to them as an anchor this December, this Advent season, as we hold on to that concept of rejoicing because there is wisdom and love and grace that is able to embrace us all. And this is a teaching that comes to us not from today, not from current trendy theologians, but from ancient siblings who are anonymous now, who held on to these same hopes that we do. I pray you have a blessed Advent, and I pray that this hymn will be meaningful and helpful to you in your Advent journey this year.